Glad to be here today with my distinguished colleague, Senator Booker, with New Jersey Transportation Commissioner Diane Gutierrez-Scacchetti, and Kevin Corbett, the President and CEO of New Jersey Transit. There perhaps is no better place to talk about mass transit and transportation infrastructure than right here at Newark Penn Station, where New Jersey Transit Rail, light rail, bus lines, PATH, and Amtrak all intersect. Passing through here each day may be a Seton Hall law student who takes the PATH in from Jersey City, a young professional from Newark headed into work in Manhattan, a family of hockey fans riding in from Metuchen to catch a game at the Prudential Center, and maybe even a senator or two boarding an Amtrak train to Washington. In a typical year, Newark Penn Station is the 7th busiest rail station in North America and among the most busiest in our region. But we all know this past year was anything but typical. For lack of a better word, the COVID-19 pandemic derailed mass transit budgets across the nation and here in New Jersey. The law school students' classes went virtual. That young professional started telecommuting. Those fun mass gatherings ceased to exist. And yet the essential workers we all depended on, the nurses and hospital staff, the grocery clerks, the warehouse workers, still rely on public transit and transit workers to get to their jobs. For entities like New Jersey Transit, shutting down wasn't an option, even as ridership plummeted, fare collections failed, and tax revenues dried up. They had to both provide service and take on increased operating costs to protect the health of their customers and their workforce. This unfortunate combination of falling revenues and soaring costs left transit systems across the nation with funding shortfalls that threatened their ability to pay their workers, keep up with repairs, make capital investments, and maintain service. That's why Senator Booker and I fought so hard to include robust aid for mass transit and transportation in the American Rescue Plan and ultimately deliver approximately $2 billion in rescue funds to New Jersey Transit. As Kevin will tell you, without those additional funds from the federal government, New Jersey Transit would have faced a 13% budget hole in its FY23 budget and a whole lot of bad choices for closing that gap. Long story short, if Congress failed to pass the American Rescue Plan, workers and commuters would pay the price. That budget shortfall could have forced New Jersey Transit to institute a devastating 15% cut to their workforce, with layoffs and furloughs affecting up to 1,800 employees and even deeper cuts in the years ahead. Likewise, New Jersey Transit would have needed to slash weekday service for rail and bus lines alike and dramatically reduce service over the weekends. This would mean even more headaches, longer wait times, and delays getting to work for New Jerseyans who already spend too much of their morning and evening commutes in traffic. Finally, New Jersey Transit would have had to delay much-needed improvements and take an axe to its bold $17 billion five-year capital plan to modernize its infrastructure. Simply put, the situation was dire. And might I remind everyone here today that the passage of the American Rescue Plan was never a given. That could have been our future. And if not for the tie-breaking vote by the Vice President, all the things that Senator Booker and I fought for would have gone up in smoke. From the direct payments and expanded tax relief for families to the multi-billion-dollar infusions for New Jersey Transit and other transit agencies. Fortunately, we prevailed, but I do want to be clear about something. The American Rescue Plan was just that. It was a rescue plan. It was not a long-term solution to our nation's outdated and crumbling infrastructure. Consider that in New Jersey alone there are 502 bridges and over 3,995 miles of highway in poor condition, which have contributed to commute times increasing by nearly 9% since 2011. That's why President Biden has been adamant from the start that our goal cannot be just to end this pandemic and return to business as usual. We have to build back better. In the coming weeks and months, the President is expecting even bolder action on infrastructure from Congress. Indeed, the American people have been waiting for decades for the kind of large-scale investment in 21st infrastructure like President Biden has proposed in his American Jobs Plan. I can tell you that what we have been doing is living off the greatest generation's investments that made us the envy of the world in infrastructure and transportation nexuses. But for several generations now, we have done nothing to improve or build upon, or even to a large degree maintain that infrastructure. And as the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, I can tell you we cannot compete with countries like China and succeed in the global economy if we do not start making bold and strategic investments in our workforce and infrastructure. So we're going to do everything in our power to make sure New Jersey's priorities are front and center in the America Jobs Plan. We have to complete the gateway projects, so vital to the economic future of the entire Northeast corridor. We must expand the Hudson-Bergen light rail, modernize our light rail systems here in Newark and in Camden, build cleaner bus fleets, all things proposed by New Jersey Transit in its ambitious 5-year plan. We have to reduce traffic congestion and build livable communities with affordable housing and transit options that connect workers and families with greater opportunity. And we've got to invest in projects that will cut carbon emissions, reduce pollution, provide clean drinking water, advance environmental justice, and protect our coasts and our climates. This isn't about just physical infrastructure. It's about the lives of people in our communities, the access to jobs, the access to economic opportunity, remedying failures of the past, creating a cleaner environment so that we can reduce respiratory illnesses in a state that has far too many of them, being able to ensure that we are prepared for the next generation. So once we put this pandemic in the rearview mirror, we've got to look ahead to the future. We have bridges to repair, tunnels to build. We have more rail to lay down, new stations to open. We have emissions to cut, a planet to protect. We have a vision for the kind of 21st century infrastructure that creates a more equitable economy here at home and prepares America to compete abroad. And we're going to do everything to fight to make sure that happens. As part of that fight, I have a tremendous colleague, has his own vision, has added dramatically to the scope of what infrastructure more broadly defined should be, and that's my colleague, Senator Cory Booker.
Good morning, everybody. Certainly you might be frustrated with all the background noise, but I want you to redo your spirit and energy right now. Every pound you hear, every grind is a sign that Newark, New Jersey is rising. Every noise, every echo is a sign that jobs are being created and the city is expanding. You are in New Jersey's largest city, and I am so proud of the progress that's being made. And I'm proud to be standing here next to Senator Bob Menendez. Bob is not just my senior senator, he is my friend, he is my partner. I am his wingman, and we are delivering for our state. I want to thank two of the unsung heroes behind me, New Jersey Transit President. I tried to be president at one point, but New Jersey Transit President and CEO Kevin Corbett, and New Jersey Department of Transportation Commissioner Diane Gutierrez-Scacchetti. This is a major moment in American history. You may not see it that way, but this is like days of old when we had a vision for air travel, and the federal government made massive investments in airports all across this country. This is like years ago, right here in Newark, New Jersey, when they dug a canal system, like the Erie Canal, that began to connect this great and expanding nation. This is just like that period of the Transcontinental Railroad, when we made real the affirmation of spiritual truth, that we are all connected to one another through arteries of transportation as well as arteries of life and community. This is one of those moments. And so here we sit in the third oldest city in America that was founded because of its transportation networks, because of its rivers, and because of its connection to the ocean, and because of its port and its airport. Newark, New Jersey, and all of New Jersey grew strong because we are one of the center points for transportation in all of North America. But we have neglected our infrastructure. The investments of our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents that built this nation, that created the largest expansion of the middle class in American history, we have neglected that. We have inherited the best house on the block internationally, and we have allowed that inheritance to rot around us. It is unacceptable that the Society of Engineers ranks our infrastructure at a D+. It is unacceptable that we have racked up almost $2 trillion of infrastructure deficit. It is now time that we invest in America again. It is now time that we invest in New Jersey again. Senator Menendez has laid out the plan in its details, and I look forward to talking about it. But this should be a moment of great American pride, because we are investing in ourselves again. And when we invest in each other, there is limitless potential for what we can do as a nation, what we can do as a society. And it's not just roads, bridges, and dear God, Bob, it's not just that tunnel underneath the Hudson which we're going to get built. We've got to invest in environmental justice, because there are too many communities all across New Jersey that still have lead pipes under the ground. We've got to invest not just in 20th century infrastructure, we also have to invest in the infrastructure of the future. It's time to build a 21st century energy grid. It's time to make broadband accessible to every child in New Jersey. This is a historic moment. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity to deliver billions of dollars for New Jersey's infrastructure and trillions of dollars, like Eisenhower did, for our nation's infrastructure. Senator Bob Menendez and I will not stop in this fight until we deliver for New Jersey. We will not stop in this fight until we create thousands of jobs for New Jersey. We will not stop in this fight until we remove toxic environments for New Jersey. We will not stop in this fight until we create a platform for the next generation of Americans in our state to thrive. Thank you very much.
And now, so we're ready to go to fight here, that's for sure. Although I don't know about my term anymore. It's created problems in the past. All right, but we are definitely on a mission. And as part of that mission, we need good partners at our home state. We coordinate greatly when we are advocating for infrastructure costs in Washington to understand how best that can make the lives of New Jerseyans better. And Commissioner Gutierrez-Caquetti is a tremendous advocate and incredibly knowledgeable in this regard. Commissioner, please go ahead.
Good morning. I have to say it is an honor for me to be with our distinguished U.S. Senators today. They are a very hard act to follow, let me say, right at the outset. But I do want to begin by thanking Senators Menendez and Booker and all of our congressional delegation for all of your hard work and support of New Jersey Transit and the New Jersey Department of Transportation as you represent us in Washington. And yes, this has been a difficult year for everyone, especially transit agencies, who not only saw a sharp decline in ridership with so many people working from home, but lost so many of their own in executing these very important responsibilities. And that is why the $30 billion in U.S. transit agencies included in the American Rescue Plan is so vitally important. It provides critical funding to keep New Jersey's buses and trains running. And as more people return to work, public transportation will become that much more essential again. And this federal funding will allow us to maintain those services for our customers. They need it and they deserve it. It is encouraging for me to see the renewed effort in Washington to provide long-term investment in the nation's roads and bridges and transit systems. Senator Menendez is correct. 502 structurally deficient bridges is not acceptable. And while we're making progress, this additional funding can certainly help us bring that number down that much faster. But the importance in investing in transportation infrastructure cannot be overstated. Public works projects have always been an essential element of a strong economy and an economic stimulus in a weak economy. In fiscal 21, the Department of Transportation embarked on a very aggressive capital program with the goal of kickstarting the state's economy. We have made great progress in the past 3 years, but there is so much more work to be done, which is why making an investment in long-term infrastructure must be addressed on the federal level. And something Senator Booker said really strikes home with me. The Eisenhower vision of the interstate was critical. How many of you today will drive on an interstate, whether it's one exit or 10 or 100? It is the ribbon that links this country into one. It takes 48 contiguous states and makes them a single country. And that vision has to be expanded to where we are today. The investments we make today in New Jersey's transportation infrastructure will ensure an economic foundation is solid for decades to come. Despite the challenges we have faced through the pandemic, NJDOT and New Jersey Transit continue to move forward, making infrastructure improvements now and for the future that will improve the quality of life for those who live, work, and play in the great state of New Jersey. Again, I'm honored to be here today. Thank you both, Senator Booker and Senator Menendez.
And now, President and CEO of New Jersey Transit, Kevin Corbin.
Thank you, Senator. And Senator Booker, you're right about that noise. For those of us who love transportation as transportation, that is not about transportation. You look at Marge Wrigley, you hear the new construction going on there, the whole renovation of Gateway. That's private sector investing heavily because they know the future for New Jersey is in Newark and is based around transit-oriented development. So you're very right to pick up on that, Senator. Thank you. But also, I cannot thank enough Diane, Commissioner, and my board chair, Diane Gutierrez-Cachetti, for her leadership. What we've done over the last 3 years would not have been possible without that. And I think, Diane, I feel 3 years, I think those are dog years. I mean, it feels like a lot longer than just 3 regular. But, as Senator Menendez said, the American Rescue Plan includes an estimated $2 billion for New Jersey Transit alone. And that is essential funding for us. The funds not only get us through fiscal year 24, and it represents about 13% of our budget for fiscal year 23 alone. That's about $355 million. Without those funds, as the Senator said, we'd be looking, you all know how hard we've had to rebuild after a decade of disinvestment. We had to get 1,000 bus drivers, hire new bus drivers. We finally just made the mark at 390 railroad locomotive engineers so that we could run all our trains reliably. And we know how important that service was, particularly during the pandemic. Even though ridership dropped dramatically, we were providing the essential service that people needed to get healthcare workers, distribution centers, people who didn't have cars, particularly on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum, to be able to get and provide those essential services. And now we see the ridership coming back. It would be absolutely the worst time to be having to lay off, as the Senator said, up to 15%, roughly 2,000 employees would have to be looking to lay off right when people are coming back and they need reliable and frequent service. I also say beyond the American Rescue Plan, again, as Senator Menendez touched on, look at the need for infrastructure. We're 40 years old, but if you go back to Pennsylvania Railroad, when we inherited, and same thing the bus systems, these were from bankrupt companies that hadn't been investing. So there's a huge backlog of investment that needs to be made in the capital side. And certainly we came up with, with the 5-year capital plan, $17 billion. It's all available online, as you know, but there's a $5 billion. That's an unconstrained gap. We have $5 billion more to do, and that does not include also the funding for the Gateway program, which we are working with the Biden administration now. We put in for submitted everything to the FTA for the EIS, and we would expect a record of decision on the EIS for the tunnel by the end of next month. And I cannot, again, take for granted both senators' support in helping us get the full funding grant agreement for the Portal North Bridge, which is, you know, $1.8 billion of construction that is currently under procurement, going out the bid, and we expect to be breaking ground on that by the end of the year. Those, you know, everyone knows that 110-year-old bridge, I think we're going to send it to Arizona where they have the old London Bridge. But these are critical things to give us the at least modern 20th, early 21st century. And as Senator Booker says, we have to look to the future, and certainly working together with the President and Secretary Buttigieg, we are very confident that we'll be able to get there, provided the funding is available. And I think I would just say in closing that I remember Senator Menendez when he was a congressman, and there was an issue over the Port Newark, whether that was going to survive, dredging the harbor and everything. And he fought like crazy and got the funding, the billions of dollars we needed to do to get the channel down to 50 feet, get the bridges raised so we could be a modern port, and now the port is booming. Without that, the port would have died. I have full confidence in his ability to come through again on this line, because it really is. This is a golden opportunity moving forward to really not just bring New Jersey Transit back to where it is in a state of good repair, but really position us so well for the future. So very excited about it, and Senators, both of you, thanks very much for coming here.
Well, thank you, and we have a dynamic duo here in making this happen. So with that, we are happy to take on some on-topic questions, if there are any. Yes?
One of the agencies that hasn't been able to benefit from the
we are looking in the next legislation to create a set-aside for port authorities general, similar, not just the Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, but port authorities in general, understanding the regional impact they have and the consequences of the work that they do. And if we can achieve that, then that would be a direct assistance. Of course, many of the efforts that are already in the American Rescue Plan and that are being envisioned here, there's a lot of work that goes on with New Jersey Transit and DOT in connection with the Port Authority that they will benefit from. But there is an effort underway to create a set-aside for port authorities in general in the next coming infrastructure legislation. Anyone else? Yes. I'm sorry, we should probably put a microphone out there too. Is there bipartisan consensus for this bill? Is that your question?
There's not bipartisan consensus. Do you support using budget reconciliation?
Oh yes, okay. So the question is, if we cannot get bipartisan support, do we believe in budget reconciliation? Well, look, the American people want to see action. They wanted to see action so this pandemic could be ended. They wanted to see action to have this economy be revived. They wanted to see action to save many of the businesses that people built a lifetime to build and that were almost crushed as a result of the pandemic. So the answer is they want to see action. They want to see a government that can actually achieve things on behalf of them, their families, and their communities. So the answer is yes. We are working towards trying to get bipartisan support. I am personally, very thankful that both of us have achieved legislative victories into law because we work with people, colleagues on the other side. But that's when you have a willing partner on an issue. If you don't have a willing partner on an issue, then you have to find a way to get it done. So reconciliation, a budget term that allows that to happen with only 51 votes is a clear option. It's not our most desired option, but it is a clear option. The American people want to see action.
Kevin, I'm so sorry.
You're not president yet.
I'm not president.
Yes.
Can you give us an update on how ridership is on transit and your projections and the money with the rescue plan help ridership?
Sure. We've seen, actually, just this week, even Friday, we saw our rail ridership coming up. The last few weeks, we've really seen, I think because of vaccinations, Governor Murphy has really done, I think, an exemplary job nationally about the vaccinations. We see that impacting ridership in a positive way. There are always sort of spikes and dips any one day if there's a snowstorm, whatnot, so it varies. But we see rail, which has been single digit, then in the teens, now in the low 20s, is now in the upper 20s. Just in the last week, we're getting into the upper 20%. Long way to go, but we really see it picking up. And then on the bus side, we're up over 50, 55%, same with light rail. A lot of those are essential workers who really rely more on the interstate going to New York. We still don't see the office market opening up yet, but as that comes back and what we hear from corporations, both in New Jersey and New York, we expect that ridership to be coming up as well. So overall, for our budget for this coming fiscal year, we're estimating 60% on average ridership for our budget purposes, and we feel that's a safe number, from a financial perspective, and obviously, hopefully, more depending as people feel comfortable coming back. And I think it's important to note, people say, why the frequency? And it's important whether you have a local service, an express service, you have to have frequency enough that people can rely to get there. Because if it's only once an hour and we keep scaling back, you get in a downward circle where it's not convenient for people to take transit, so they start going more and more back to cars, which is the last thing we need or the environment needs. So that's sort of the overview. No, our budget does not call for a fare increase next year, but it wouldn't be okay at all but for the senators delivering, the relief that we have in the program.
I'm a believer if you build it, they will come. But if you don't have it, it's just not going to happen. And if you have it infrequently and you can't rely on it, you're not going to show up. And so that's why this is the challenge with transit systems. You have to have frequency, you have to have reliability, and if you have those things, people will use it. Peter? Oh, you want to take that?
The question is, there are some people who are expressing concerns that there are things in the infrastructure plan that are not infrastructure. So first of all, on the environmental components of the bill, whether it is cleaning up abandoned mines, cleaning up the Superfund sites we have in New Jersey, getting lead pipes, I'm sorry, that's infrastructure, and I stand by that. It is critical that we have that kind of environmental strength. Another criticism might be some of the green policy that's in this, creating a 21st century grid, investing in the kind of regenerative fuel. That is infrastructure as well. It is the energy infrastructure we need for the 21st century. And then finally, perhaps most controversial are some of the components that are investing in people, in human power. Well, I will tell you, for a 21st century global knowledge-based economy, the most important infrastructure we can have is investing in people, investing in families, and making sure that in America we are producing the strongest minds and the most productive people that there are, and dealing with everything from child poverty, which undermines overall productivity, all the way to dealing with ideas like affordable child care and more. That is an important part of our societal infrastructure that will make us more competitive. And every study that I have seen, empirically, shows that $1 invested in all of those types of infrastructure, from the tunnel under the Hudson all the way to lifting a child out of poverty, returns to our overall economy more than $3. And for a region that knows a lot about investment, it's probably one of the best investments we can do as a society.
Any other on-topic questions? Yes. I'm sorry? Well, when we get to that, any more on-topic questions? Yeah.
Well, another point your Republican colleagues don't necessarily agree on is the effort to lift the cap on SALT, on state and local tax deductions. Is that something that's negotiable and you consider ways to pay for the plan?
No. Look, the state and local let me take a step back to answer your question. New Jersey is a blue chip state. It is a maker state. It gives more to the federal treasury than it receives. There are other states in the nation, including the Republican leader of the Senate state, that are moocher states. They get billions more than they give the federal treasury. So why do you attack states like New Jersey and eliminate the deductibility of the state and local property taxes so that we can continue to be a blue chip state, so that people want to live in this state because there's tremendous transportation, great institutions of education, a good quality of life, the finest public schools in the nation, and on and on and on. But that costs money. So we should have the deductibility that we have had. One of the oldest deductions in the federal code is, I say that as a member of the Senate Finance Committee, one of the oldest deductions in the federal code is the state and local property tax. President Trump and Republicans took it away so that they could give tax cuts to the wealthiest people in the nation and the biggest corporations. I don't think that's fair. So yes, we believe in restoring the totality of the state and local property tax deduction. That continues to allow states like New Jersey to make investments in its 5-year capital transit plan, continue to make investments in our public schools, continues to make New Jersey a blue chip donor state. So we don't see this as a negotiable item. Any other on-topic questions? All right. If not, one or two off-topic, we'll have to catch a train.
This is for both senators. Biden's going to be in office by the end of this week. Anything you have to say about how he's doing so far?
So the question is, President Biden will be 100 days. He's going to, by the way, he's going to speak to the nation on Wednesday at the State of the Union. And how do we think he's done? Well, for mine, I think he's been superb. Why do I say that? When he took office, this pandemic was raging. We were told that there were reserves of vaccinations. There were none. The previous president left us zero, none. There was no plan to roll out the vaccinations and to have them administered. And instead of 100 million vaccinations that the president said that he would accomplish, 200 million vaccinations have been accomplished. And it's not just about the number. It's about that's what's going to allow us to end the pandemic, stop the spread, stop the variants, and get our lives back together and get this economy moving again. President Biden did that. President Biden also understood the enormous crushing consequences that the pandemic brought to American families and to businesses and to our economy. And his rescue plan is, in essence, the response to that reality. That's what put $1,400 in people's pockets. That's what took care of so many children, my colleague being the biggest advocate of the child tax credit and what it meant in beginning to lift millions of children out of poverty. That's what he did to help small businesses. He got it. And in the world, I can tell you, as the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, he is restoring the integrity of the United States across the globe. Once again, traditional allies like England and France and Germany believe that they have an ally in the United States and that we can work in common cause to meet some of the greatest challenges in the world. And just Saturday, the president did something that no other president, Democrat or Republican, has done. He recognized the Armenian genocide that took place 106 years ago, 1.2 million lives that were lost. And in doing so, he showed the moral compass of this administration that, yes, human rights and democracy is once again one of the pillars of our foreign policy. He's to be commended dramatically. I could go on and on. I'll let Corey add his own vision to it. But I give him a superb rating, not because he's a Democrat, but because of what he's done.
Bob said it, but I just want to put this in very simple terms. Everybody should ask themselves, am I better off now than I was 100 days ago? 100 days ago, we had vaccine shortages. Now we have one for every American that wants one. 100 days ago, we had millions and millions of families in economic crisis. Now, over 80% of New Jerseyans has had a $1,400 check and a massive expansion that affects 90% of New Jersey children in the child tax credit. Are you better off than you were 100 days ago? Well, 100 days ago, New Jersey Transit was not running as frequently it is now. Are you better off than you were 100 days ago? There were small businesses in this very city that were struggling without access to capital and the billions of dollars more that they can access for grants and loans. Are you better off than you were 100 days ago? Even if you were unemployed 100 days ago, you didn't know if your unemployment was going to run out or not. Are you better off than you were 100 days ago? Yes. America is thriving and on its road out of the valley of the shadow of death and to the high ground of national success. So I give President Biden the simple answer unequivocally. Your first 100 days were an extraordinary success, and I can't wait to see what we together will achieve in the next 100 days.
Any other questions? Okay, last one.
Senator Menendez, the Star Ledger has reported critically of Estes Moore's potential to become the U.S. attorney. The Star Ledger has reported critically of Estes Moore's potential to become the U.S. attorney. Do you have reservations on how to potentially make that such a thought? Senator Booker, do you have any objections to Estes Moore becoming the U.S. attorney?
Well, first of all, I have had a historical view that I don't comment on someone who hasn't even been nominated. I don't comment on individuals who may be considered and may not be nominated. When they get nominated, whoever that person may be, for whatever position they may be, we have 2 federal judges that are up this week that Senator Booker put forward and I supported. They're going to go through a rigorous review process. They went through a review process once they were brought to the Justice Department and the White House Counsel. Now they'll go through a rigorous review process before the Senate Judiciary Committee, and then they have to go through the crucible of a vote in the Senate. But that's once they were nominated. So I don't cast views on individuals who haven't been nominated. I guess somebody has a magic ball to understand what's happening, number one. And number two, I would just simply say, I don't live in the Olympian tower that Mr. Moran lives. I don't live in a world of only black and white. I don't live in a world that anybody who comes from Hudson County is not worthy of achieving any position.